Let me start by asking you a question, and I want you to notice what happens in your own body before you even try to answer it logically.
Okay, I'm ready.
So imagine a close friend sits down heavily across from you.
Right.
They haven't slept, they look completely depleted, and they let out this just massive sigh and say, I am drowning in work.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. But what is your immediate reaction? Do you start looking around the room for a life preserver?
I mean, of course not. You don't ask them if they need a towel. You don't check their clothes to see if they're wet.
Exactly. And the reason you don't do that is kind of the key to everything we were talking about today. You instantly hear the picture.
Yeah, you really do.
Before a single word of logical explanation is offered, like before they tell you about the emails or the spreadsheets or the crazy deadline, the communication has already happened on a completely visceral level.
It happens instantaneously. As the listener, you actually feel a shadow of that physical weight.
You totally do.
You feel the panic, the specific, I don't know, lack of air that comes with being submerged. We just implicitly accept that a completely fabricated image, water rushing over someone's head in an office building, is somehow the most accurate, truthful way to describe their reality.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we instantly understand that drowning picture without needing a logical translation, then everything we've traditionally been taught about how language works is completely backwards.
It really is.
We're looking at some incredible research today, largely built on the work of researcher Zuhair Malej from his 1999 paper, Metaphor Making and Processing. And the mission for this deep dive is to completely reframe how we understand everyday human language.
Which is a big undertaking, but it's so important.
It is. We are going to explore how metaphors are not just poetic decorations. They aren't just, pretty talk for people who want to sound smart. They are active, incredibly powerful cognitive tools that literally build and change the worlds we live in, especially when we're dealing with personal struggles, feeling stuck, or trying to help someone else get unstuck.
What's fascinating here is that this is a massive paradigm shift. I mean, for centuries, the academic world, the linguistic world, basically treated metaphors as a fresh coat of paint.
Just paint.
Yeah, just paint. The historical assumption was that you build a solid, logical sentence first. A serious, factual sentence that represents reality. Then, if you're a poet or maybe a politician trying to sound eloquent, you apply a metaphor over the top of it just to make it sound nice.
So the idea was that the literal words were the structure and the metaphor was just the wallpaper.
Exactly. But Malej's work argues the exact opposite. He says a metaphor is the mechanism by which one human mind offers another human mind an entirely new picture of the world to inhabit.
Wow.
It's not decoration at all. It is pure architecture.
Architecture. That's a great way to put it. That implies there's a structure you can actually walk around inside, rather than just a shiny surface you look at.
Exactly.
And if we look at how experts historically viewed this, what we could call the great metaphor myth, the assumption was always that ordinary plain talk is where the truth lives.
Right, the facts.
Right. If you want to be accurate, speak plainly. Fancy talk is just a distraction from the facts. But then, as researchers actually started paying close attention to how humans intuitively communicate, that entire theory just shattered. Look at children.
Oh, kids are the best example.
They are. Kids do what linguists call mapping all the time, long before any teacher sits them down and explains what a figure of speech is.
We should probably define mapping here, because it's kind of the engine of human cognition.
Yeah, please do.
Mapping is simply taking the physical rules or feelings of one reality and applying them to an abstract concept so we can make sense of it. We take something we understand physically, like spatial distance or temperature or physical confinement, and we map it onto something we can't touch, like an emotion or the span of time.
Right, so when a child feels trapped by a daily routine, they might map the physical feeling of being stuck in a box onto their schedule.
Exactly.
And adults do this constantly without even trying. I mean, listen to people in a grocery store or an office break room. Time is running out. She is a rock. My life is a prison.
Yeah.
Nobody sits down with a quill pen and tries to invent clever poetry when they're stressed out about a deadline.
Precisely. They aren't trying to be clever. They're mapping, because human brains fundamentally operate in these mappings, not in raw data.
Right.
A person who says, my life is a prison, is actively living inside a set of locked doors. They are experiencing the guards, the restrictions, the missing keys.
So even if their physical reality is totally normal.
Right. The objective physical reality might be a nice suburban house with a mortgage, But the psychological reality, the world they have actively installed for themselves through that mapping, is a concrete cell.
So if this mapping is happening naturally, like all the time,
Mm-hmm.
why did the old school language experts get it so wrong?
Ah, they missed it completely.
How did they try to explain away this phenomenon where people constantly say things that are technically untrue? Because there were a few major historical theories that attempted to rationalize this, right?
Yeah, and they all completely fail the reality test.
They really do.
They fail spectacularly because they ignore the emotional weight of language. So the first of these failed explanations is what we can call the broken grammar rule.
Okay, what's up?
This theory essentially suggested that a metaphor is just a sentence that intentionally breaks logical or grammatical rules to force the listener to find a different meaning. So let's say someone says, the rock is getting brittle with age. The old linguists would say, well, a literal stone doesn't age like a human body. Therefore, the listener registers a grammatical and logical error, realizes it's a mistake, and deduces that you must actually be talking about a stubborn old person.
So the theory is that your brain hears a literal error and goes, wait, error detected in physics engine. Beep boop. Let's recalculate and find the hidden literal meaning.
Exactly. It treats the human brain like a very rigid computer. And why does that fail? Because a broken sentence is a remarkably weak clinical test that totally misses the heartbeat of the moment.
Right, it's too cold.
Way too cold. When your friend says, I'm drowning in work, your brain doesn't stop and think, an error in fluid dynamics.
Right, they're sitting in a dry chair, therefore they must mean they have too many tasks.
You don't calculate. You just feel the fear in their chest. The picture runs in your mind before the grammar alarm ever has a chance to go off.
Which brings us to the second failed theory, which is even more tragic in a way. It's the hidden plain sentence theory.
Oh, I hate this one.
It's so bad. This is the belief that speakers are just hiding simple, plain meanings inside complex RC words. If a child comes to a parent and says, I am a dot, this theory says the adult should translate that into, oh, you secretly mean you are feeling shy.
And that translation is a tragedy because it destroys the architecture you were just talking about.
Yes.
The child didn't hide a clear sentence. The child doesn't have the word shy or the clinical understanding of social anxiety.
They just have the feeling.
Right. The picture of the dot, something tiny, something easily overlooked, something isolated on a massive blank page, is exactly how they have organized their current problem in a three-dimensional space.
That is such a powerful image. The blank page.
Exactly. To just flatten that expansive spatial picture into the clinical two-dimensional word shy completely destroys the world they were trying to show you. The useful move for a parent or a helper isn't to translate the dot into adult vocabulary.
Right.
The useful move is to stay in the world of the dot.
That makes so much sense. You don't correct their world, you enter it. And then there's the third old theory, the secret like sentence. This is the idea that every metaphor is just a disguised simile. So if I say he is a tree, this theory claims I'm really just too lazy to say he is like a tree, and the listener's brain automatically inserts the word like to make it make sense.
Right.
I have to push back on this one heavily because it completely misses how human psychology works. So saying it's secretly a like sentence is like taking all the spice out of a curry to make it safe for someone who hates flavor.
That is a great analogy.
Right. It completely takes the punch out of the statement. If someone says he's a tree, they are purposely refusing the soft, safe version. Adding the word like wakes up the arguing, logical part of the brain and ruins that compact, undeniable picture.
That analogy of taking the spice out is perfect. The word like keeps the thinking mind in charge. It acts as a buffer.
Right.
It says to the listener, relax, we are just comparing two separate things, A equals B. But dropping the word like forces the listener's mind to actually complete a new reality. The direct picture does the heavy lifting, bypassing the logical filter. It's visceral.
Yeah, it really is. Now, to be fair to the historical linguists, there was one slightly better view that eventually emerged from the old schools. It proposed that metaphors are essentially two different worlds touching and borrowing habits from one another.
Ah, the borrowing of habits. That's where the mapping becomes behavioral.
Exactly. So, for example, if we map the concept of an argument onto the world of war, we start borrowing all the habits and vocabularies of a battlefield.
Right.
We talk about attacking a weak position, defending our argument, shooting down an idea, winning or losing a debate.
Wow, yeah, we use those all the time.
Or if we map the concept of talking onto the physical world of boxes, we try to put our thoughts into words to unpack an idea, to get our meaning across the room.
Like it's the physical package.
Right. The two worlds blur together, And this theory is much closer to the truth because you can actually hear the physical map someone is walking on.
Give me an example of that.
Sure, if a married couple sits down and says, we keep fighting the same battle, they aren't just having a disagreement about the dishes, they are living their entire relationship as a war.
And that map runs their actual behavior.
Exactly.
If your relationship is a war, you have to be armored. You can't be vulnerable. You have to sleep with one eye open, which naturally leads us to ask, what is the actual machinery here?
Right.
If these old theories, the broken grammar, the hidden simile, if they fail to capture how we actually build these realities, what is the engine driving this? How do we construct a brand new world using words without sounding like we've completely lost our minds?
Well, the mechanics of a successful metaphor rely on two specific elements traveling together in perfect balance:
Okay.
imagination and sense. Let's start by looking at imagination. In this context, imagination isn't just daydreaming. It is the mind's active ability to find a new link, or to tie together two concepts that our logical brain knows shouldn't go together.
There's a really haunting example of this in the source material. Imagine looking at a jagged mountain range right after your husband has died and calling those mountains remorseless.
Yeah.
Now, logically, mountains are just geological formations of rock and dirt. They don't have a conscience. They are entirely incapable of feeling remorse or guilt. But the imagination forces that emotional link.
Yeah, it
The
does.
sentence physically transforms the mountains into silent witnesses or even perpetrators who committed a crime against you and simply do not care.
The grief projects itself onto the geology.
Yes.
And notice how that imaginative link works even in completely mundane, everyday phrases. The hours crawled.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Time suddenly has a physical body that is dragging itself agonizingly along the floor, a warm welcome, a bitter person. Emotions suddenly have a thermal temperature and a taste on the tongue. Your mind doesn't need a spreadsheet to figure those out.
No, you just get it.
But imagination alone isn't enough to build a shared world. If imagination runs entirely on its own with no breaks, you just get dream talk. You
Yeah.
get pure fantasy.
Right. If I just start tying random words together, like the purple sideways banana saying a tax return,
Exactly.
you don't feel a deep emotional resonance. You just think, I'm rambling, I've lost you.
Exactly. The listener's brain rejects the offer and stops trusting you. That is why the second component, sense, is the vital grounding force. Sense is the anchor.
Okay.
Sense is what signals to the listener's nervous system, this person isn't lying, they aren't just making random noises, they have a very real reason for saying this to you.
Let's look at the example of sense acting as an anchor. Bureaucracy drives a paperclip through a man's soul.
Oh, it is incredibly visceral. You immediately wince.
You really do. Now, logically, you don't call a surgeon for a paperclip injury to the soul. That makes no sense. But you also don't walk out of the room thinking the speaker is insane.
Right.
You stay in the conversation because you implicitly trust the underlying reality of what they are conveying. Sense allows you to trust the strangeness of the image long enough for it to actually work on your nervous system.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that alchemy between imagination and sense is everything. If the metaphor is too wild, leaning entirely into imagination, it's just noise.
It's just weird poetry.
Right. It's performative poetry that doesn't touch the listener. If it leans entirely into sense and is too flat, it's just a dry lecture. It's a textbook.
Boring.
Exactly. But when you hit that perfect sweet spot, it slips completely under the listener's defensive radar. It completely bypasses the critical, arguing mind. You can physically see it happen in a deep conversation or a therapy session.
What does that look like physically?
Well, the listener's eyes will literally change focus, usually looking slightly down or off to the side. Their breathing shifts. The mapping happens without anyone forcing it because they trust the sense while being emotionally activated by the imagination.
So once we've built this perfectly balanced metaphor using imagination and sense, how do we actually deploy it? Because this is where we have to completely step out of the realm of facts. We have to stop thinking in terms of what is technically true and what is technically false.
This is the core of the whole premise, and it is a massive hurdle for highly logical people. Metaphors are not stating a fact. They are making an offer.
An offer.
Let me explain the difference. If I say the door is open or the meeting is at 3 o'clock, those are factual claims. You can test them. You can look at the door. You can look at a clock. They are either definitively true or definitively false.
Okay, yeah.
But a metaphor operates on a totally different wavelength. It's like a child playing make-believe, coming up to you and saying, let's pretend I am a hungry hyena and you are a bone.
Right.
You don't cross your arms, look down at them and say, false. I have reviewed the biology, and you are a human child. You can't grade it like a math test. It's an invitation to step into another reality for a little while.
And treating an offer like it's a cold, hard fact is incredibly dangerous,
Um,
especially when people are hurting and trying to express their pain.
oh, absolutely.
Imagine a scenario where someone in a counseling session, or even just a friend over coffee, looks at you and says, "I'm a failure." What mechanically happens if the person listening treats that statement as a fact to be debated?
It instantly creates a courtroom.
The courtroom.
Yes. If you treat I am a failure as a factual, objective claim, your instinct as a caring person is to argue against it. You want to bring counterproof to the trial. You say, no, you're not. That's false. Look at your successful career. Look at your beautiful family. Look at your degree.
Which is well-intentioned.
It is, but what does the hurting person instinctively do? They bring their own proof to defend their original statement. They list their mistakes, their regrets, their bank account. Suddenly, you are aggressively fighting over evidence.
Oh, man.
And the profound tragedy of the courtroom dynamic is that the fight itself keeps the old world locked firmly in place. The identity of being a failure is actually sustained and reinforced because they are actively defending it to you in this trial.
You literally force them to argue for their own misery. That is so sad.
It happens all the time.
But the incredible power of recognizing it as an offer is that you don't have to argue at all. If you treat "I am a failure" as an offer about how they currently see their life, you can just make a counteroffer.
Exactly.
You don't tell them they are factually wrong. You tell a story, or you take their picture and grow it until the ending naturally changes. You invite them into a different world instead of fighting them in the old one.
Exactly. You fundamentally refuse the courtroom. You say, I see the world you are in. Let's play in this world of images for a moment.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, and I have to push back a little on how universal this is. We're saying metaphors automatically install a world if we treat them as offers.
Mm-hmm.
But what if my world doesn't match the metaphor you're offering?
Okay, give me an example.
Take the phrase from the source. Ambulance workers rush victims through the doors of bankruptcy. That relies heavily on placing a hospital and financial ruin in the exact same picture. But if I live in a country with universal health care, or if I have immense generational wealth and have never once feared a medical bill, doesn't that offer just bounce right off me? I mean, I can't map it.
That is a crucial pushback, and it highlights a fundamental rule of this architecture. A metaphor is not a magic spell that you can just cast on any human brain and expect it to work uniformly.
So it can fail.
Oh, absolutely. The offer only works, it only installs a world when the other person's lived experience has a receptor for it. If you have never feared a hospital bill, the doors of bankruptcy won't open anything in your mind. The emotional bond fails.
It just doesn't click.
The image has to map onto a fear, a hope, or an experience already residing inside the listener. When the listener's life is ready for it, a fitting picture installs itself effortlessly in one pass. When the life isn't ready or the cultural context is completely different, the offer just sits there on the table, unclaimed.
Which means there's this massive, perilous gap between the words coming out of my mouth and the meaning forming in your head. Bridging that gap requires an immense amount of trust.
It requires trust, and practically speaking, it requires a setup.
A setup. Like a joke.
Just like a stand-up comedian has a setup for a punchline, or a fairy tale has a setup, once upon a time. A therapeutic session or a deeply meaningful conversation requires a setup. The physical room you are in, the tone of your voice, the pauses you take, all of these somatic cues tell the listener's nervous system how it should be listening.
Oh, I see.
The setup signals. Drop your guard. I'm not giving you a lab report right now. I am making an offer.
The gap between the words and the intent is so fascinating. There's a brilliant story to illustrate this cognitive gap, using Agatha Christie's classic detective, Hercule Poirot.
Oh, I love this example.
It's so good. So Poirot is talking to his assistant, and he dramatically announces that they're going to destroy a monster with 9 heads, and his helper gets terrified, assuming they're literally going to the zoo to fight a mythical biological beast. But Poirot meant gossip.
Right. In Poirot's mind, gossip is the monster with 9 heads. You cut off one rumor in the village, and 2 more immediately sprout up in its place.
Exactly. The actual words monster and 9 heads are just the springboard. But the listener have to be willing and able to make the cognitive leap from the physical words to the abstract concept.
Right.
If the listener clings desperately to the literal words, they just end up standing at the zoo looking for a dragon.
And this highlights perfectly why a dictionary is a completely inadequate tool for understanding actual human communication.
Because it's too literal.
Exactly. A dictionary gives you the rigid, historical definition of a word, but to understand a metaphor, to actually bridge that gap we're talking about, you need access to a person's entire life web.
Let's define the web. We aren't talking about the internet.
No, no. We're talking about the neural and emotional network of associations inside a person's mind. Think about the word horse.
Okay.
A dictionary will tell you a horse is a large, solid-hoofed, herbivorous mammal typically kept in a barn. That's the literal definition.
Sounds about right.
But in another Poirot story, he says he is out to tame the wild horses of Diomedes. Now, in Greek mythology, those specific horses were man-eaters. So when Poirot uses the word horse in that context, he doesn't mean a peaceful barn animal.
No, not at all.
He means insatiable hunger. He means lethal danger. If you only have the dictionary definition of horse, you miss the world entirely. You need the cultural web, the mythic web, the emotional web.
And the beautiful, delicate thing about that web is that it completely belongs to the listener.
Yes.
The speaker doesn't control it, which is why there is one absolute non-negotiable rule when you are using metaphors to help people. You have to let the listener finish the metaphor themselves.
You absolutely cannot over-explain it.
Oh, it completely ruins it.
It really does.
If you tell a beautifully crafted story about a struggling bird with a broken wing trying to fix its nest, and the listener is leaning in, tearing up, and then at the very end you lean across the table and say, and the bird in the story is you.
Ugh.
It's so patronizing. It shatters the magic.
It's worse than patronizing. It is structurally fatal to the cognitive process.
How so?
The very moment you explicitly say the bird is you drag the thinking, argumentative, logical mind back to the front of the stage. You wake up the courtroom.
Right.
The internal search instantly stops because while you were telling the story, the listener's unconscious mind was already doing the heavy lifting. It was quietly making all the connections, mapping the bird's broken wing onto their own trauma.
So you interrupt the work they were already doing?
When you over-explain, you insult the web. You have to leave the metaphor close enough for them to grasp, but far enough away that they actually have to reach their own hand out to take it.
Yeah.
You let their web finish the construction.
So we've talked about the mechanics of how this works. We've talked about the offer, the gap in the web. Let's move into the real-world application. Let's talk about practical alchemy. How do we actually use this architecture to change someone's reality or to change our own? Because the whole point of Mellige's premise is that metaphors don't just passively match reality. They actively rearrange what is possible in the physical world.
They literally change the object in the world. Let's analyze a specific sentence. Nuclear plants leach the wounds of a sick economy.
Leach. That is a very specific, loaded word.
Think about what that single word does cognitively. A leech is an ancient, primitive medical treatment. It involves attaching a literal parasite to the skin to draw out blood under the guise of healing, but it's actually just draining the patient's vitality.
Right. It's gross and exhausting.
By applying that specific verb to nuclear plants, the speaker fundamentally changes the object. The plant is no longer viewed as a gleaming technological miracle of the future. In the mind's eye, it instantly becomes a weak, archaic, parasitic cure that comes with a heavy, draining cost. The physical object itself shifts based on the word.
And we can see these incredible, life-altering shifts when we look at how people talk about their own bodies and futures. Let's look at 3 real-world examples of how shifting the metaphor shifts the entire lived experience.
Let's do it.
Let's start with the athlete. Imagine a student athlete who is completely paralyzed by performance anxiety, and they are living the game as a trial.
Let's walk through the architecture of a trial. If the game is a trial, then the physical world is populated by judges.
Right.
Every action has a verdict. There is an overarching atmosphere of guilt or innocence. Every dropped ball or missed shot isn't a mistake, it's a crime that you must be punished for.
That's terrifying.
The somatic experience of a trial is tension, fear, and defense. You're sweating, you're waiting for the gavel to drop.
Yeah.
But if a coach or a therapist can help that athlete shift the underlying metaphor from trial to skill, the entire universe changes.
Because the skill world is totally different.
A skill world has no judges. It only has practice, body memory, and timing. There are no moral verdicts in a skill world, only repetitions and adjustments. It is the exact same human being, playing the exact same physical game on the exact same grass field, but their internal world has been completely rewritten.
The pressure just evaporates because a skill doesn't send you to jail.
Exactly.
Then there's the sick person. Think of someone dealing with chronic pain or a severe autoimmune condition who views their own body as an enemy.
The architecture of an enemy dictates that it must be fought. It requires constant, exhausting vigilance. You have to go to war with your own cells.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
But what happens mechanically if the body is shifted from an enemy to a system? A system isn't malicious. A system doesn't hate you.
Right. A computer system doesn't hold a grudge.
Right. A system might be malfunctioning, but it can receive safety signals. It can be recalibrated. In the enemy world, your nervous system is flooded with cortisol because you are under attack. In the system world, you can introduce deep breathing, warmth, and a slower pulse to help the system reset. The physical behavior of the immune system can actually follow the new world map.
And the third example is the blocked person. Someone who is staring down their future, and they describe it as hitting a wall.
Yeah, we hear that one a lot.
A wall is definitive. It means the forward walk is entirely over. You just stop and sit down in the dirt. But if you can help them shift the image from a brick wall to a path that turns around a massive boulder,
The rock is still there.
the obstacle hasn't magically disappeared. The rock is still real, it's still heavy, and it's still blocking the straight line. But the world now has lateral movement. You can walk a little further to the left or the right.
This is exactly why working inside the person's picture is so vital for real change. Going back to our earlier example, if someone says, "I'm a dot," you don't pull out the diagnostic manual and give them a clinical diagnosis of social anxiety.
Right.
You get inside the metaphor with them. You ask, how does a dot move on the page? What happens to the dot when a larger circle gets near it?
I love that.
If they say, the hours crawled, you ask, what needs to happen in this room for the hours to stand up and walk? You use their own architecture to build a new exit door.
So what does this all mean for us physically?
Mm-hmm.
Because we aren't just talking about a mental exercise here. The research emphasizes deep physicality.
Oh, absolutely.
It talks about deep quiet, noticing the breath, or even a therapist asking a client to draw a jagged, violent red line on a piece of paper, and then asking what it physically takes in their hand to turn it into a smooth, calming green line. This is body work, right? It's not just brain work.
It is entirely bodywork, which brings us to an incredibly important realization about how we define the web we discussed earlier. The physical body is an integral, non-negotiable part of that associative web.
Wow, okay.
A metaphor isn't just a mental concept floating in the ether, it is a somatic physical experience. When that athlete shifts from a trial to a skill, their nervous system physically relaxes. You can watch the shoulders drop 2 inches. The pulse actively slows down.
That's incredible.
The research points out that the more the physical body and the new image agree with each other, the less the old argument has to be won logically. The body holds the new picture securely, even long after the conversation has ended and the words have stopped.
Let the body agree so the argument can fade.
Mm-hmm.
That is such a profoundly different way to look at healing.
It completely sidesteps the intellectual, stubborn resistance that keeps people stuck in their misery.
Okay, let's bring this all together. If we distill the core insights from Elijah's work and the psychological research we've explored today, we arrive at a profound, actionable truth. Metaphors are not true or false tests.
They're not.
They are not. Pretty decorations meant to make us sound intelligent. They are sensible, deeply grounded uses of imagination, designed to literally change the physical world by changing what people are capable of seeing.
And the ultimate goal here, whether you are a professional therapist, a manager trying to help an employee, a parent, or just a friend sitting across a coffee table, is to categorically refuse the courtroom.
Yeah.
Stop aggressively arguing over literal facts when the actual problem is the invisible world they are currently trapped in. Offer them a new picture, set it up carefully with sense and imagination, and trust their own life web to finish the construction.
Refuse the courtroom. I love that so much.
Yeah.
We spent this entire deep dive talking about how to carefully listen to other people's metaphors, how to hear the specific world they are trapped inside, and how to offer them better, more spacious ones. But we want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to chew on today as you go about your week.
What's that?
Think about the quiet, automatic, throwaway metaphors you constantly use to describe your own life to yourself, inside the privacy of your own head.
Yeah.
I'm running on empty, I'm fighting an uphill battle, I'm constantly putting out fires, I'm spinning my wheels.
We all do it.
We do. But if it is true, that every single metaphor actively installs a physical and psychological world, what kind of world are you accidentally installing for yourself before you even get out of bed in the morning?